Coding Elixir with AI or building AI into your Elixir apps? The Elixir AI Collective Discord is your community for both. Link in the description below. Secure your Elixir apps with Paraxial.io. From code analysis and bot defense to dependency checks, they've got you covered. Elixir first design with GitHub integration. Elevate your security at Paraxial.io. Testing. What's up? I'm Jacob Litzo, your Elixir mentor, and welcome to another exciting episode of the Elixir Mentor podcast. This is where we discuss everything related to Elixir, from interviews with enthusiasts, pioneers in the community, to innovative projects and libraries shaping Elixir's future. Today, I'm joined with Leandro, creator of MDEx and Lumis, and he's also a returning guest on the podcast, so it's exciting to have you back. Thanks for joining me today, and yeah, I always have more fun when I have returning guests. I don't know why. I feel like we already broke the ice.
Thank you for having me back on, and excited to be talking about MDEx and Lumis this time.
Yeah, and I feel like last time we talked about Beacon, and I feel like you were working on, like, the UI. Was it not? No, what were you working on? I'm blanking now.
Yeah, it was about a year ago, so probably I was working on the admin interface for Beacon.
That's right. Okay.
Yeah, so we were working on the live editor of templates.
That's right.
And it became a Elixir Conf talk in 2024 as well. So
nice.
yeah.
For a little quick refresh for those watching that might not know you, do you want to give just a brief background of yourself?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, sure. So yeah, I've been working with Elixir for 10 years now. I used to work with Rails, back in the day, and I'm from Brazil, same as Jose Valim, so it was kind of natural to me to get into Elixir. And those 10 years trying to make my contributions to the community. And some of you might know me from Beacon when I was working at Dockyard. Now I'm working at IntelliSpark. It's an edtech solution for US-based schools. And also work on the MDEx and Lumis projects, Markdown and Syntax Highlighter. It's a mix of Elixir, Rust, and someone now is porting the Lumis project to Java, and I'm also working to port the Lumis project to JavaScript as well. So there's a lot we can discuss.
Yeah, that's really cool. I'm curious what sparked MDEx. What made you want to make a Markdown library? And I'm guessing it's written in Elixir, right?
Yeah, that was it started about maybe 3 years ago ish. So I was working on Beacon SMS, right? And we had to migrate all the blog posts from the old Docker website to Beacon. And that means migrate about 800 blog posts, just, Markdown. And as you can imagine, 10 years of history, different people writing blog posts, Markdown files. So we had a bunch of different Markdowns to migrate from the old one to Beacon. And that's when we realized that Earmark at that time was not generating the output we were expecting. And so just to be clear, Earmark is a really amazing library. It has been serving the community for so many years now. So it's a really, really hard work to do. So if Earmarks works for you, keep using it. It's amazing. But for us back then, we had an issue with some blog posts, because the problem with Markdown is a permissive format. You can write whatever you want, but there's no guarantee the output is what you expect, right? So let's say, for example, you can write a table or a list but the generate HTML might not be what you expect. And that's the problem I found with some specific details with year mark. And at that time, I opened an issue for the project. I was willing to contribute back upstream to fix year mark, but the maintainer at that time, he just realized the year mark. He could not change the year mark design to make that implementation. So I was stuck with this problem. I need year mark solution, Markdown solution to migrate all the blog posts of the dockyard, but I was not finding an Elixir solution, right? So coming back from Elixir Conf in Florida, I was stuck at the airport because of a thunderstorm. So there was no timeline for my flight, and I had nothing to do essentially. So that's when I opened the Rust book, started reading about Rust, and decided to create a new proof of concept. Just a wrapper of the conrec library. Conrec is the Rust parser that does all the Markdown parsing and rendering for MDEx. So that's when I started MDEx. It was pretty much a proof of concept, just to see like if you can use conrec, a well-established Markdown parser for Rust, if you can use that in Elixir. So I was there at the airport, just reading the books and writing some code, and that's how MDEx started essentially. And yeah, so I use most of my free time at that time to work on a proof of concept, and then eventually, when I proved that it was working, I started using MDEx on Beacon, and that's how Beacon came to life. And I'm also grateful for Dockyard because I was also working on MDEx on my work time sometimes. So that was let's say a sponsorship of Dockyard on the project as well.
Yeah, that's really awesome. So I'm curious, are you basically just using a NIF then with Comrack, or how's that working?
Yeah, it started just like a NIF, just a wrapper essentially, just passing the options from Elixir to Conrack and return the HTML. So it starts like this, very, very simple at that time. Now the project has grown to have way more features like plugins and streaming and HEEx support and more features that Conrack does not have. It's just an Elixir MDEx solution.
Okay, cool.
But it's still using Conrack.
Okay. What's the most difficult thing you've ran into right now building MDEx?
Probably in terms of implementation, I would say streaming, but that's not the only difficult when you're working on an open source project, right? There is like maybe people don't realize how hard it is to work on open source project. And even though MDEx is not a super huge library, but maintaining a project is really hard. But in terms of implementation, I would say streaming. Streaming is the feature that allows you to heal or complete the fragments of Markdown. And that's very useful for AI-like applications where you have the tokens. So the AI is feeding some tokens to you. Those tokens are incomplete fragments of Markdown. And then you have to render that those fragments. So that's really, really hard to do because you have many edge cases that you have to solve. So for example, let's say you have like a code block or a table or blocks of Markdown. You have to complete those blocks, and then you have to parse and render those fragments. And there are many ways to do this. Probably the most popular library now is Stringdown by Vercel. They have like this kind of library for Markdown as well. And there are some others implementing a different way, creating new parsers for this specific use case. But for MDEx, it does not make sense to create a new parser because we are using conrack, and it's not an easy task to create a new Markdown parser. So the way it works essentially is as we get new fragments, we keep placing those fragments into the stack and using Nimble parsec to parse those fragments, and then try to figure out which element we are working with, like a table or a paragraph or a list, what kind of element we have in that fragment. And then we have to complete that fragment, like a link or a table. For example, let's say we have just the header of the table and just the first column of the table. Let's say we have those tokens in the stack. Then we have to complete the rest of the table in order to render that table. So yeah, streaming is.
I'm curious with streaming, you might not always have you might not know that the table's finished yet, right? Because you can't control what's coming through, or is that interesting? And so you just kind of assume it's finished, and you have to end the table, and then as more data streams in, you build on it, or how does that work?
Yeah, that's pretty much how you work. How that's the problem we have, because most of the parsers, the Markdown parsers, they need the full document, the full Markdown.
Yeah, that
So
makes sense.
they only work with the full document, not with fragments or pieces of Markdown. So as we receive fragments, we need to complete them. So for example, Stringdown is using regex. So they just try to find the element by regex. So let's say there is an asterisk. So you know that's if that's like a bold statement or something like that, and then you have to place the end of the fragment so you can render that. So let's say you receive like a dash for a list, right? And then you have to render that as a list. So you have to complete that element as a list. And as you receive more of those elements, you keep, you keep just feeding the streaming parser and just like a buffer. And then eventually you just flush and render.
Okay. Yeah, how do you keep track of syntax? Like you're obviously what's the word I'm looking for? You're basically like optimistically completing things, right? So how do you
Yes.
know when it's like you can't just like insert that optimistic completion, right? Because you have to know it was you that added it as more data streams in, or am I overcomplicating things?
No, that's some implementations, that's how MDEx works. So let's think about an example here. Let's say you have a code block is probably the most, the better example here. Let's say you start code block. You have the backdates and you have like the Elixir info string, and then you start streaming some code, like the first line, the second line, and so on. So when MDEx receives a new fragment, it just plays the block end, the end of the block to close the code block. And so as it gets more and more code lines, it just completes the end of the block and render that piece.
Okay.
So eventually it's gonna receive the end of the block. So it just discard
I
that
see.
temporary block and then continue. But the only thing that MDEx does not do now is reverting a decision. So let's say you receive a piece of Markdown, and for some reason the streaming parser thinks that's a list or a code block or whatever, and then eventually it realized that it was not a code
Okay, so it
block
can't
or a
go
list.
back and correct its mistake.
No, not right now, because that's really, really complex to do,
I'm
because you
sure.
have to keep not only future like fragments, but you have to keep the stack of the whole document. And it can go back to the beginning of the document, right? Because
Mhm.
Markdown, you have blocks and inline elements, and then you have nested elements. So you have to go back to the root of the decision. So that's really hard to do, and that's something that is not worth doing right now, because
I'm
most of the
curious.
parsers can do that.
Yeah, I'm curious. Do you have like a solution mapped out in your head or not? Is it just too
Uh,
complicated or you haven't spent much time on it?
no, I had some ideas, but it gets so complex. It's not worth it.
Well,
That's the
and like
problem.
you performance becomes a problem, right? Like everyone expects like a markdown to be rendered relatively fast, right? Especially when you're streaming the data in, that should be almost instant.
Yeah, it also depends on the runtime where you are calling MDEx.
Mm,
If you have a LiveView where you can diff you can diff the content, then that helps a lot, right? Because as you get more fragments, and then you can just diff the render to a LiveView page. You can just leverage the diffing algorithm of LiveView. So it really depends where you are streaming that markdown.
I'm curious, like once you have like all the data, like, well, at least like a portion, and you realize like, some syntax was assumed incorrectly, couldn't you just re-render everything you have in memory at that point? Or does it not really work that way?
You can, but there's gonna be like a flag on the page, right? Let's
Mm,
say you had like a list, and then you just re-render the whole document. If it changed the elements, you're gonna see some changes on the page. Like you're gonna see like the page changing. It's
yeah.
not a big deal, but it's possible to just, the document is finished, try to render the whole document, and make and fix any mistakes. But the idea is to reduce the mistakes as much as possible, that you don't need to do that.
Mm-hmm.
There was a contribution recently. Someone sent a fix for the streaming parser, adding more patterns, because we are using Nimble Parsec. So that's how we identify the patterns. And someone sent a fix to improve it. So I think it's pretty stable right now. Some tools are using. We have Ashi, Jido, and other libraries using MDEx. I don't know who is using the streaming feature, to be honest, but I know some companies, some tools, some people are using the streaming feature now, so it should be
Nice.
stable enough.
That's awesome. I won't be probably using the streaming feature, but I am gonna check it out and implement MDX into Kill Switch. I think it'll be cool.
Yeah, just like if you do, just pay attention to the render HTML. Something that does not look right,
Hmm.
just open an issue, and then we can work on that, because there are many, many, many edge cases with streaming, because you don't control the fragments, right? And it can be like a whole list or just a piece of that list, and that list can be like a task or no task, and then you don't know if you have to render a text or a task, like those tasks you have on GitHub. So it's really hard to get all the elements correct, but you know it's kind of it should be stable now. Yeah.
I like that. How long have you been working on MDX?
On MDX, Let me check. The first version was September 2023.
Okay.
It was right after Elixir Conf. It was just the first version, like the proof of concept was working, and then I released the first
It
version.
all stemmed from you getting bored at an airport.
Yes, it's like that. Yeah, yes. I had no idea how Rustler worked. Like I knew about Rustler, but never had used it in a project before. So I started just learning there, and and that's how it started.
Yeah, I have never used Rustler or NIFs in my own projects, so I'm aware of them. I have zero experience with them. What was the learning curve like? Do you think is Rustler pretty easy or was it complicated?
I, to be honest, I think Rustler deserves more attention from the community because a really, really good piece of software. It solves a lot of problems because sometimes you don't have a library in the Elixir community, so you can just leverage other ecosystems, right?
Hmm.
And Rust has a lot of libraries for a lot of
Well, and like
different things.
if you're doing heavy computing or anything, you're better off using Rust instead of Elixir too, right? Just for speed of processing.
It depends. It depends what you if you need to exchange data, there's going to be an overhead between Elixir and Rust.
I see,
If you
yeah.
can if you can share the same space of memory like some projects do, then it's okay. But if you need to exchange data and serialize the data, then it's going to have some overhead. But it really depends on the project.
Hmm.
But the thing is, you can share the same space of memory, and that's a really, really cool feature. Then it makes it way more performant.
Yeah, I can see that. That's cool. Maybe someday I'll like come up with an excuse to try Rustler and put it in a project.
Yeah, it's a really nice project.
So now like I feel like MDEx and then it's Lumis, right? I'm saying that correctly.
Yes, I think so. To be honest, I renamed the project. It used to be called another name, which I don't know how to pronounce. So that's the reason I I renamed to Lumis.
Okay.
And I just say Lumis, but
Nice. Now, I feel like I don't know. I would always kind of assume the like Loomis would just be integrated into a markdown, but there's probably a lot more complicated aspects to syntax highlighting for code blocks, yeah.
yeah, Lumis also start like um, to solve a problem on the Dockyard blog post because we had to, we have to have syntax highlighting for different types of languages and code because the blog has Ruby, JavaScript, Swift, and a lot of other stuff. And in Elixir, we have the makeup library, created by José Valim, and then it didn't have all the parsers that I needed for this problem. So then I started researching the options I had, and I had two options essentially. Either I had to create new parsers for makeup, and I had to maintain those parsers, and it's not easy to create those parsers either. Or I could just leverage three-seater. Three-seater is being used by a lot of editors now. It's just a parser for, it's essentially a parser for languages. It defines the grammar for languages. And then one of the modules is the syntax highlighting because it identifies the tokens on the source code, and then you can apply like colors on those tokens. So those are the two options I had. And since I was already working with Rust in MDEx, I decided to just give a try for you know for this for three-seater. I was using a library called Inkjet, back then, it was also Rustler, pretty much the same idea. And Inkjet, the Inkjet used to work with the HEEx editor, right? So we had the three-seater grammars on one side and the theme, the color schemes from the HEEx editor. The problem though was that the colors were not matching because many themes from the HEEx editor they were like outdated or incomplete. So it was not working very well for my specific use case. And I was contributing to that project, the Inkjet project, but it came to a point where I decided to create my own project so I could have the three-seater grammars and the Neovim themes. Because in Neovim, you have like all the themes, all the color schemes are very well maintained, and we have a lot of options. So that's when the syntax highlighter started. But it started as like internal code inside MDEx, and then it started growing to the point where I create the Autumn. It used to be called Autumn in Elixir. It was I separate the two projects. So MDEx and Autumn back in the day. And then eventually I realized the Autumn project was more Rust than Elixir because there is no bindings for three-seater for Elixir, no official bindings. It's just Rust. I mean, it's Rust and some other languages, but no Elixir. So the project was pretty much just Rust, right? And then I realized that it was better to just release a Rust library. The problem was, the problem though is like the auto name was not available to publish as a Rust library. And the best name I could find was Autumnus, which is Latin for autumn. It was not working very well because it's hard to pronounce. People don't understand it, including me. So eventually I just renamed to Lumis, and now we have Lumis for Elixir, Lumis for Rust. We have a CLI. The maintainer of, I don't know how to pronounce this correctly, but Shikari or something like that is the WASM runtime for Java. He also ported Lumis for Java, so we also have a Java library now.
I was going to ask, are you supporting all these multiple runtimes, or do you just let other people support them?
Well, I'm working on a JS runtime now, JS version, so yes.
Okay.
So yeah, so the core engine is just Rust, and CLI is also Rust. Elixir is a Rustler wrapper, so it's not that much code right now.
Okay.
JS in TypeScript, on the other hand, is the most complex one, I'd say, because the biggest problem is with three-seater is all the languages that you have, they are defined. The grammar is defined like as a JSON JavaScript file, and then it compiles to a C, transpiles to C, and then you compile that. The problem is a parser for a Rust or Elixir, they have like 1 megabyte or 2 maybe. So if you include all the languages, like let's say 100 different languages, each one consuming like 1 megabyte or 2, it does not work. Like you're not gonna download 200 megabytes for just a syntax highlight library.
Right. What?
Right?
You don't want just bloat in your project?
Yeah, so that's the biggest problem right now. And
keeping projects small. Yeah, that makes sense.
So the way I'm trying to solve this now is using WASM. So three-seater has a target. You can compile the parsers into WASM modules, and then the JavaScript libraries can just load those modules, those languages dynamically at runtime. So the core is to TypeScript, but the languages, the parsers are loaded dynamically. So that's a way to solve this problem, although it's not perfect because there is an overhead to load those languages. But that's the best we can do right now, at least until we have the WASM components. WASM components might solve this problem, but it's not something we can use right now.
I see. I don't know if I fully understand how WASM works. Can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So essentially, you can think about WASM like having for example, we have the Bean VM, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you run some code into the VM. WASM is a WASM requires a runtime as well.
Okay. Yep.
So in Rust you have WASM time. In Elixir we have some as well. For
Okay.
Java there is this Chicori, something like that. It's a runtime as well. For JS, we also have some runtimes. So you need to load that runtime, and then you can load the WASM modules into that runtime. And it works for the user and also for the developers. It works like transparent, like it's transparent. You can just call the functions from the WASM module. So if you create like a hello world function and then compile into a WASM module, you can call that very same function in any runtime in Rust or JS or
Okay, I
Elixir.
see. That's pretty
So
cool.
yeah. WASM is really, really nice. I had never used it before for anything like for real. It's the first time I'm using WASM for something that, I have to make it work correctly. It seems to be a really good solution. I know, and some projects are using it now. For example, the Popcorn. I know it's on the news now. Popcorn is using WASM as well to load Elixir on the browser. So yeah, it's a really nice solution, but there are some limitations. It's not a perfect solution. But my idea with this is having the same API, the same syntax highlight API for different platforms. So we have the same API for JS, same API for Rust and Elixir. So you can have the same syntax highlighter, the same colors, the same languages, parsers, all the ecosystem in different languages.
Yeah.
And including the CLI.
Yeah, that's really cool. And then it'll work the same way as you kind of change technologies and tech stacks too, right? You'd be pretty familiar with the library.
Yeah, because right now you have really good libraries, but if you go to JavaScript, you have to choose one. If you go to Rust, you have to choose another one, and so on. So sometimes you have a backend, a front end, and you have to choose different syntax highlight libraries, including the CLI. All those coding agents now have a syntax highlighter, and actually, Tree-Sitter works really well for AI streaming like feature interfaces, because Tree-Sitter, it works really well with incomplete code.
Yeah, that's
So
cool.
the same problem we had with Markdown.
Interesting. All right, I'm going to put this on hold for a second and we'll be right back in I don't know, 30 seconds.
Hey, I'm Kimberly with Elixir Mentor. Jacob recently added recruitment services to help companies hire pre-vetted Elixir devs. I help with company outreach, so if you're hiring, I may be reaching out, or you can connect with us anytime at elixirmentor.com.
And we're back. All right. So I'm curious, between having two, you're kind of the solo person in charge of MDEx and Lumis, right? How do you balance the two, just having two open source projects? I feel like that's a big undertaking.
I mean, you have to choose the most important features. And one thing I learned, I was talking to Zach from Ash a while ago, and one thing he said to me that is really important for open source project is to be it should be as responsive as possible. People open issue.
Dude, Zach is the most responsive person I've ever met. It's
Yeah,
impressive.
he and Valim, they are like I don't know. I think they are some kind of bot because
I
it's
know.
not
I don't think
possible.
they're real people, dude.
Yeah,
They can just spawn up new versions of themselves and they're just everywhere.
yeah, it's it's unbelievable. But the idea is to be as responsible as possible. If you have someone opens an issue, if you don't have a solution, at least just reply and say, hey, I'm going to work on this. It's on the backlog. I have some ideas. And then you just kind of, gives, give something to the person. Sometimes that person has some idea. He's just not sure what to do. And that's how you also get contributions back. Right. So the idea is to be as responsible as possible. That's the first rule. And, using AI nowadays is a way to help with the backlog. Even though like vibe coding is not a solution, you have to be very careful.
Yeah, have you seen any like nasty, messy contribution attempts? Like, does it increase your PRs from contributors or not really?
No, not really. MDEx and Lumis are not projects that are receiving a lot of PRs, I would
Yeah.
say. But it's interesting because we are getting more contributions. The last MDEx version was pretty much just external contributors. So that's really cool when you have people contributing.
That is cool.
Right? People are not only using the project but also helping to improve it. And I saw yesterday on the Elixir forum I hope to be pronouncing his name correctly, the Austin Ziegler. He's building some plugins for MDEx. So
Oh,
it's
nice.
yeah, it's really nice because the plugin system. I was talking to Wojtek Mark like 2 years ago because the plugin system is based on the REC system. Plugin system is pretty much the same idea, and he was really cool to just use it, and he gave some ideas, some feedback as well for MDEx. And now you can build plugins. I built the GFM, the GitHub Markdown. I built the Mermaid as well, and a few others. And now people are also building plugins, right? So it's not just the MDEx. Like we have MDEx, the plugins, Lumis, and also Conrec, which the upstream Markdown parser. I am also a contributor to Conrec because I need to make changes on Conrec first to support features downstream in MDEx. The most impactful contribution on Conrec from my end was the HEEx parser. So the Markdown can work with HEEx components and Elixir expressions. So, but yeah, back to your question. Essentially, you have to be very pragmatic. Like you have an issue, you have a PR, you have to take a decision. Don't let it pile up. Otherwise, there's going to be a lot of PRs and issues. You have to be responsive. It's
Yeah.
hard, but at least for now, MDEx and Lumis are not like huge projects like Ash or Phoenix or whatever. So it's fine for now, but getting if it does get more contributions and issues, I don't know, just, you have to find some time.
Yeah, for sure.
And yeah, recently I opened the sponsorship on GitHub,
Oh,
and
nice.
yeah, I got some sponsors. Like, it's not something I'm looking for, like my, it's not my main source of income or
Hey
something like
guys,
that.
head over there and sponsor this project.
Yeah, like if you're using MDEx, feel free, and it's a really nice way to help as well.
Hmm.
And I'm grateful to have some, like, I had one I had some one-time contributors. Mike from Jido is now contributing monthly
Oh,
as well.
nice.
So that's really, really nice to have. Like, open source is about community. That's really what open source is.
Cheeto is something like they're making new projects every day. I feel like they're I can't keep up. I'm in their Discord and I can't keep up.
Yeah, you open Twitter or X or whatever, and there's a new project. Like, okay, I
Yeah.
didn't have time to see the other one. Now there's a new one.
I'm gonna
Yeah.
make Mike come on and do like a coding live stream with me because I was like, dude, I can't keep up, so you have to teach me everything that you're doing in judo.
Yeah, it's really. I mean, now with AI, it's really hard to keep up because
I
new
feel like
projects come
everyone's pedal
every
to the
day.
metal now, and it's like new stuff multiple times a day. Like we thought it was hard to keep up in tech before AI, and now look at it. It's
Yeah, we still
insane.
need. I guess we still need to learn how to navigate these times because new projects, contributions, and a lot of stuff happening at the same time.
Yeah.
Um, in Markdown, for example, we have so many new projects because Markdown has a specification. So I'd say using AI to create a decent parser from just from scratch, just using AI is, I'd say it's possible.
Hmm.
So I have, I'm trying to follow some projects, but every day there's something new, even for Markdown or syntax highlight stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy. One thing I'm noticing is there seems to be a growing gap of like, especially so like I offer like pre-vetted recruitment stuff. And so I'm reviewing a lot of code. And I think we have the issue that I'm starting to see, and it's kind of annoying, is I think you have a lot of people that are like very like junior, mid-level developers trying to claim senior level now because they think they can code so much better and faster with LLMs. But you're just like wading through so much LLM slop. It's like they don't know how to actually create well structured code with LLMs, and there's a big gap because like I see like senior level guys that I work with on a daily basis. I know they're using LLMs to write their code, but it still looks like good code, and you're not over engineering solutions. But then you have like your less talented developers that are just like spitting out these crazy over engineered solutions, and it's like almost too much. And you're like, come on guys, you got like there's got to be, I don't know, we need like a better push to teach people how to use LLMs in their workflow.
Yeah, yeah, and that reminds me of another Jido project. There's like a Jido spec or something, like the spec driven development. That's a new. I mean, it's not a new thing, but seems like to be born again because of AI. So because there's a big difference between the AI driving the code, driving you, and you driving the AI coding
Yes,
agents,
100%.
right? And seems like spec-driven development is kind of, the it's not. I'm not gonna say the solution because we are still learning, but the spec-driven development might be a way that people can, just stop for a second, think about the problem first, and to realize a good design, you have to be a senior developer. You have to have experience right? And so AI alone is not enough. You need to understand what's happening. So, for
Well, you
example,
need to be able to catch architectural mistakes too, right? If you just are just generically asking an LLM to create a feature and there's no guiding or planning to that feature, you're going to get over-engineered slop and like unused. Dude, the amount of unused code in coding projects is baffling to me too.
Have you ever tried to ask Claude to review the codex or GPT code or vice versa? They, put the two together, one reviewing the code of the other, and they always find bugs and like a lot of stuff. Like,
I'm like, it'll be like hit or miss. I feel like sometimes it'll just be a total garbage review, and then sometimes it'll actually find stuff that's like super helpful, but it's not consistent enough that I trust it. Like using like Copilot to do code reviews or Claude to do code reviews, like I feel like it hallucinates more than it helps, but I still use them.
Yeah, I'm finding that having skills, really well written skills,
skills are
helps.
important. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it does help a lot. It reduces hallucinations. It's a way to like a constraint for the AI, for the agents. But I've been doing this experiment, like running Claude and Codex at the same time and asking one to review the code of the other. And it's funny because if you go back to Claude and say, hey, that's what GPT found about your code, and then it's like, oh yeah, that's really a bug. Like, so why didn't you get that bug before?
Yeah.
So you cannot trust for sure. Like, you have to review the code. You have to know what's happening. So it does require some, experience to use AI.
I think a big mistake a lot of like mid-level and under developers are making too is they're trying to one-shot these things instead of like stepping through a problem. Because I like the smaller you break things down, the higher quality the code can be. Because you're actually paying attention to it more carefully too. So if it spits out something that's not quite right, you're going to correct it and then move on, right? So I feel like the one-shotting giant features is not the smartest move without plan. So like I have like one-shotted features before, but like I have a whole planning phase and I create like an epic and issues and like a checklist essentially, right? So that helps
but that
a
works
lot
because you have experience in that, right? That works because you know what's happening.
Yeah.
So vibe coding is a mistake. It does not work.
Yeah, I think of it more as like a junior's writing the stuff you don't want to write, but you still are reviewing it and putting your name on it when you hit that merge button, you know?
Yeah, I mean, it's really good to have contributions on projects, but you have to be careful, especially on bigger projects. And even like bigger projects now, they just reject AI contributions. So they just
sometimes it's hard to tell though. It's getting harder and harder.
Yes, that's true. That's true.
But I think like the giveaways are I mean if you're not careful, you get random really weird comments in your code, and I don't think any well-written code needs comments, so you shouldn't have commented code. And then I would say over-engineering problems. That's like a big giveaway.
Yeah, you can tell. Sometimes it's hard, but you can tell when it's AI generated code, like comments, and it does not go straight to the problem, or it is not using the right boundaries on your code. There are a lot of, or for example, adding new libraries that are outdated, stuff like that. So
it loves using old libraries. Like you got to check that on everything.
Yes, which actually in an open source project makes sense because you cannot. It depends on the ecosystem, but usually you have to declare older versions, so otherwise people cannot use your project.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But in a regular project, usually you want to you want to have the latest, right?
Yeah.
And AI, usually they fail to do that.
They're always a couple
So
versions off,
yeah, yes. So there are ways to, that you can tell if it's an AI generated code or not. But I guess sometimes it's really hard and it just goes.
Yeah.
But for open source maintainers, I can see the problem. Although I'm pro AI, I like to use AI. I think it helps, but you need to understand what's happening, right? Because the code is still yours. It's
Yeah.
your PR. It's your branch. It's your code, even though it was generated by AI.
Yep, I agree. I'm a big, I'm a fan. It took me, I was like a late to the party here, but late to the party, but now I like it because it just improves my efficiency. And once you kind of know how to work it into your own like workflow and planning, I think it's a pretty powerful tool. Like I'm not a good front end developer, and it helps me be a lot better front end developer. So
Yeah,
it's beneficial
yeah,
for me in those ways.
yeah. Same here. If you go to the Lumis website, that was AI generated. Like the front end is, I have no idea to how to write that code because I'm not a front end developer either.
Yeah.
So for that stuff, it's really nice. And also, for example, the Lumis requires a lot of like bureaucracy code, like defining the languages, repos, and all that stuff. That's the kind of code that AI just shines. Just repeated code. Just get
Hmm.
this block and repeat and change just the name or just a URL or something. It takes forever to maintain this kind of code. But with AI, it's just 5 minutes and then you review and it's done.
Yeah,
So there are many uses for AI.
for
You
sure.
just have to be careful.
You definitely do. And yeah. Guys, if you're not truly like a mid-level or senior, don't pretend you are because you think you are with AI. Just, take you got to go through the same ladders and steps everyone else has, and you'll get there eventually.
Yeah, but you can use AI for learning as well,
Yes,
right?
absolutely.
That's
I use
also
it all the
another
time
way.
for learning, honestly. Like if I ever see like a block of code or like some kind of like flow in the code base that I'm not quite sure how it works, dude, I
Hmm.
I have AI break it down for me.
Yeah, I do the same, like for research, and you can just use AI, just like, hey, give a talk and help to brainstorm something or research. Or even learning about a new product, about a new code base. It's really helpful.
Yeah, for sure. I'm curious, with like MDEx and Lumis now, do you have any projects that you're building where you're using them consistently or not really anymore?
Um, I was using for the WASM research because had never used WASM before, even though I knew about it, but never used. So WASM research and these new JavaScript library requires a lot of copy and paste code essentially. So I'm using for that as well, and using for code review as well. Even though it's not perfect, but sometimes it catches some bugs or something that you really sometimes you miss something, right? And then you can use for code review and give some hints about something you're forgetting or you have to take another look. So for code review as well, and for Lumis and MDEx, that's where I'm using AI now essentially.
Okay, nice. I feel like there's some sort of benefit, like if you don't to have another engineer look at code that like not everyone can pick up everything, like you'll miss things from time to time. And I feel like on solo projects, AI is a huge benefit there because it's kind of like an extra pair of eyes. At least it makes you look closer at parts of code, whether you agree with what it finds or not.
Yeah, that's true because most open source projects are just just one person like
Mm-hmm.
working on a lot of stuff at the same time, on his free time or short limited time. So it's a way to unblock new features,
Yeah.
to help with code review. Yeah, it's for. I mean, there are downsides of using or abusing AI in the open source community, but it can also help.
Yeah, 100%. That like now that you're not like working on the Beacon project, and that's where you're kind of consuming these libraries. Are you consuming your libraries anywhere else currently, or no?
No, not really. Although I really enjoy working on MDEx and Lumis, I'm not going to stop. But I had some ideas to use MDEx or Lumis, but I was trying to find some ideas where I could monetize the projects, right? Like a private project, like not a private, closed source project, something I could sell.
Yeah.
But for now, I'm just trying to get the bigger features that I want to have on those libraries, and then eventually maybe create something like a side project, not something big or whatever, something small that I could try to monetize and help
Mm-hmm.
to help fund the project.
Yeah, yeah. I'm a big believer in doing like micro products and just have, a couple micro products and, try to grow them to a couple thousand users. And then that's good like side income and eventually like it could replace, your day job, whatever, and then you just have all these cool side projects that actually monetize.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not looking to keeping my day job, but it would be nice to have like a side project that I could mainly help to fund the project, MDX
Yeah,
and
for sure.
Lumis. That would be nice.
What do you have any ideas that you can share?
No, not really. That's the problem. Every day you open Twitter and there are like a bunch of new projects, a bunch of new ideas and stuff. And
There's no
you,
original idea at this point anymore, is there?
yeah, yeah, but you can always innovate, even in well-established, um, areas. But the problem is there's so much happening at the same time. And Markdown has been used in projects for like MCP projects or that kind of stuff, but it's moving so fast that your idea becomes stale like in a week.
Yeah.
So it's like it's hard to decide. It's hard to find something that you can like commit to, because if you start some side project, you have to be certain about that project, right? Because you're going to spend some time.
Hmm.
So it's yeah, for now, just working on the open source projects.
Fair enough. What kind of things do you work on with your day job?
Yeah, so right now I'm working at IntelliSpark. They are a tech solution for US based schools.
Oh, okay.
And so I can't say for sure, but we were one of the first to use LiveView in
Oh, no,
production.
I was just gonna ask, are you writing Elixir every day
Yeah,
there? Yeah,
it's
awesome.
Elixir essentially. Yeah. So we have been using Phoenix LiveView like for years now, and since like the first one of the first published versions. And yeah, so it's pretty much Phoenix and LiveView, and we do have some Markdown in the product, but not so much. We use MDEx here, but it's not the core of the product. But most of the project is just Phoenix and LiveView, and
Okay.
that yeah, and that's how I got into LiveView, and that's yeah. So that's the project we are. It's pretty much just LiveView, yeah.
Okay, cool. Any like interesting, fun project or problems that you've recently ran into that you had to solve?
Like here, or like any, like you mean here in the company or
Yeah, in
in,
the company, just on the platform. Like, do you have like a pretty large user base? Do you have performance issues you're dealing with?
yeah, I guess um I guess now is more about scaling the company. When you
Okay.
have like you have a product and you have a bunch of clients and you have to scale like the the infrastructure that you have, you need to scale, and the code base. So we are at this point now. Um, but over the years, that's how I got into Phoenix LiveView contributions, because we started using LiveView on this product, and also Ecto and all the other libraries. And we had to like we needed some features that we didn't have back in the day. So for example, when we start scaling and having more customers, we had to analyze the performance of the database and the queries on the database. So that's, for example, when I contribute the explain function in Ecto, so we can run the explain query
Mm-hmm.
on Ecto. And so, yeah, I was able to do some contribution here and there in the ecosystem because of the company's growth. So that's another way that you can also, in my opinion, you can contribute to open source. Right? You have a problem in your project, like don't wait for a solution. Just
You
you
can
can go
solve it.
there and fix
Yeah.
it. Yeah, I know it's hard, but it's another way that you can contribute to open source.
Well, I always find it funny when you see like open source projects and someone's complaining about a feature not working or wanting a new feature. Like, guys, you could just ask if it's on the roadmap and then submit the PR. Do it. Like, if you need it, you should submit the PR.
Just open Cloud Code and
Just
vibe code.
vibe it out. Put on your sunglasses
Yeah.
and go.
And just submit the PR. Yeah, but you can do like you can for sure contribute. Um, it's not super hard, I would say. Um,
Just make sure
it's
that it'll be accepted before you put in the work, though.
Yeah, it depends. When it's a feature request, depending on the project, you have to use the issue tracker, or there's a
Right.
forum where you can chat about, or a Discord server. When it's a bug fix, I'd say don't wait, just send the patch, just send the PR. And yeah, that's the good thing about Elixir community is that we are pretty much everyone is very friendly and
Mm-hmm.
open. So it's a I would say Elixir is a we could say it's a small community compared to others. So we kind of know each other, if you know what I mean. And then it's easier to get contributions in this environment. It's
For
more
sure.
friendly than others.
Yeah, I'd say for the most part, everyone's really nice in the Elixir community. I think that's one of the bonuses, right?
Yes, yeah. And yeah, for MDEx and Lumis, we got some contributions recently, and it's it's nice to see the library growing and contributions. So sometimes people ask me like, hey, can I contribute or can do something? Like just open the issue, like open an issue, we can discuss, we can sometimes it does not work out, but eventually most of them does work, and that's how you can get contributions done.
Yeah. Any lessons that you can share having open source projects? Because like did you do anything before Beacon, or was Beacon kind of your first open source project?
um I used to do some contributions back in the day for Ember.js and Rails.
Okay.
That's when I started. And then, eventually after migrating to Elixir, getting some contributions to Elixir projects. But I don't know, maybe Beacon was, the first big one, I would say, if I can say
That
that.
you were like a main contributor on?
Yeah. But I would say if you're starting a new project, if you want to succeed, I would say marketing is very important.
Mm-hmm.
Even though no one likes to do that.
No, it's the hardest thing ever.
Yeah.
I always tell people the easiest part of like building like a SaaS product or like a library is coding. And that's just
Yes,
because my
coding is
brain's
easy.
my brain's not wired for the marketing and the sales. It's like you wish the statement build it and they will come. You wish that was true, but it's the farthest thing from the truth.
And I'm guilty of that. I'm guilty of that as well, because that's, MDEx, for example. I never talk about MDEx in public. I
Well,
had a
here we
meetup.
are though. You're in public.
Yeah, that's the first time I'm talking about MDEx in English. Like, before that, I had a meetup, a remote meetup in Brazil, but it was in Portuguese, right? Now is the first time I'm talking about MDEx in English. Like the library is like 2 years old more, and that's the first time I'm talking about MDEx in English. So marketing is important. So right now we have 500,000 downloads, and I have never talked about MDEx in public. Only like Twitter. Sometimes I just post some releases.
I was going to ask, how do you think people are finding it? Through the HEEx library or through the HEEx website? Probably following you on Twitter.
I'm not sure, to be honest. I know some people react on the Elixir forum. People use the Elixir forum as a source of new libraries and use on the community. The Thinking Elixir podcast, they have been covering the MDEx releases for some time now. I'm very grateful because that's a
Oh, that's
really good
awesome.
source. Yeah. I know Mark is using MDEx, so he's always, following the development of MDEx. So that's probably a good source. But I'm not sure. People just start using, and sometimes people just say, "Hey, I'm using MDEx on this," and I had no idea. I don't know, to be honest, where people are finding MDEx, but again, marketing is important. So I'm trying to be more open about the development. There are a lot of challenges of the development of people sometimes don't realize how hard it is to Markdown and syntax highlighter. They look like a simple problem to solve, but it's not.
Yeah. I mean, just talking to you
And
about like the streaming aspects and like things that I never even thought about.
yeah,
Like
and
there's a lot of complex problems under the hood for something that you just want to work perfectly, right? As a end user, you just think, oh, it's simple. It's just
yeah,
Markdown, dude. It's just Markdown.
it's not like streaming is just one of the features. We have a
Right.
bunch of more stuff.
Is there any
And
benefit, do you think, like building a Markdown library in Elixir versus other technologies or languages?
there's another Elixir library. I think it's called MED, if I'm not mistaken. And it's a really nice idea because it's pretty much event-based. Not even like process, but more like a functional design. So you can leverage this kind of functional design in Elixir. I wish I could I wish I could write a parser, a pure Elixir parser for MDEx. I don't know, maybe someday, but you can.
What's the most difficult part there? Just finding the time to do it? or are there limitations that you know of?
Markdown has many edge cases. You have to, like, the parsing is not easy. You have to deal with a lot of complication. Even though you have the specification, like you have the common mark specification, which is like 10, 11 years old now, this specification. So it is well established. But there are many, sometimes some parts of the specification you have to understand what they mean. Like, it's not strict specification sometimes, and there are many edge cases that you have to deal with. So if you look at the correct source code, it's like really complex source code, and the correct author, I think they used to work on the GitHub specification at GitHub, and now working at GitLab. And GitLab is kind of sponsoring the Conrack development, and Conrack is used to generate all the Rust docs, like we have the HEEx docs. Rust also has documentations, and they use Conrack. So it's a well established parser. So there are some reasons to create a pure Elixir parser, but it's not an easy task.
Yeah, I'm sure. Sounds like a lot of work.
Yeah, like Conrack has a lot of contributors now, so it's the only downside of using Conrack, in my opinion, is really having, like, it's not a blocker, but it's a Rust library. So if you want to use it, you have to either download a pre-compiled binary or compile the Rust code.
Right.
Right, which is not a big deal, but there might be some scenarios or environments where that's not allowed. But otherwise, it's fine. The Rustler pre-compiled project is like amazing. It solved this problem of compiling the Rust code, right? You can just have the pre-compiled binary.
You also have to kind of like pick and choose how you want to spend your time, right? For an open source project that's not really making you any money except for, a few sponsorships, do you really want to build a whole parser from scratch or just leverage a tool that already works really well,
Yeah, like I have so many ideas to do with MDEx and Lumis. The next one I'm gonna work is the HEEx parser. Right now we do have HEEx support. You can write HEEx components, Elixir expressions inside the Markdown, and it does generate it compiles to I forgot the name of that struct now. The struct that is used by LiveView, so you can just render a Markdown inside a LiveView page, like if you had a HEEx template. So you can have components and expressions inside Markdown, but there's a problem. The way it works now, it just identifies the boundaries, like what is Markdown, what is HEEx inside the Markdown document, and it keeps the HEEx part out of the Markdown parser. And then we do a second pass compilation using the HEEx compiler. So first it parses the Markdown, keep the HEEx, like does not change that part, and then a second pass with the HEEx compiler. The problem though is the inner content of those HEEx parts, HEEx blocks. We need to parse that as Markdown as well, because if you have Markdown inside a component, which is inside the Markdown, inside another component, it can be nested. We need to go down all the children and parse those small pieces of Markdown as well. So that's how other libraries work, like MDEx, the JavaScript library. That was the main inspiration for MDEx. There's MDEx.js. They work this way. If you have JavaScript inside components and Markdown as well, it does render the Markdown, it does parse the Markdown inside components. And that's really hard to do. I'm working on the Rust code, make that happen on the correct parser. As I get that done, I can just use on MDEx. And then finally, I can say the HEEx support is like 100% done and working. So you can have Markdown with Elixir for Elixir projects.
Yeah, that's awesome. And right now, HEEx isn't fully supported, or it is?
It works, but if you have Markdown inside the components, it's gonna be like just raw text.
Oh, okay, I see.
Because what it does is all the text, all the information inside the block is just HEEx. And then when you send that to the HEEx compiler, if you have like a title or a bold text or something like a Markdown text, the HEEx compiler has no idea that's a Markdown, right? Then it just renders as a raw text.
I see.
So that's the problem we have right now. I'm trying to solve on the Conrack side first, the Rust parser, and then I can use on MDEx.
Okay, that's cool.
So, yeah.
See, yeah, you never would think the complicated under the hood problems you have.
Yeah,
and now everyone knows that listens to this podcast. They know how hard creating a Markdown library is.
Yeah, it's no easy task. And that's why maybe I mean, again, I should be talking more about those those problems, because it's really fun to solve those problems, but it does take time, and I could be sharing more about those problems.
Yeah, no, it's good, and I'm glad that you're on the podcast talking about it. And I just had to have you back on more often to keep us updated on all your projects.
Yeah, that would be nice, because if I get the three-seater, Lumis alone has a bunch of complex three-seater Neovim themes that we need to extract, and now Wasm compilation, bunch of stuff happening there. So you can just to have nice colors on the source code. The output seems simple, but all the engineering before is the hard part.
Yeah, for sure.
And for MDEx, MDEx has other features as well, but one of the main concerns is also the performance. We had this problem back in the day with Beacon, because we had to compile a bunch of pages at the same time, right? So if you take a second to compile a page, I mean from Markdown to HTML to LiveView.
Mm-hmm.
If you take a second or two or whatever, and you have 100 or 1,000 pages, performance matters. And that was one of the reasons I chose Conrack as well, because on a benchmark, it's way, way faster than any other Elixir library.
Yeah.
And Conrack is not even the fastest implementation. There are others even more faster than Conrack, but Conrack is fast. Is fast enough.
So what's the fastest, breaking down to a C language or something like that, or getting?
Yeah, there is. I mean, again, there's there is a pull down CMark, which I believe is faster than Conrack.
Okay.
There is also MD for C, which is Markdown for C. It's also really, really fast. But the problem is Conrack was the only one that had extensions that I could support GitHub and like Discord, Flavor Markdown, GitLab as well. And it had extensions, so I could plug in a syntax highlighter and a bunch of other stuff. So, and since the author used to work on the specification, the GitHub specification, and now working on the GitLab specification, I mean, they really know how it works. So they have hands-on experience. So it was the safest choice. And
no,
I was glad to, yeah. And I was glad to know the Rust team chose Conrack to generate the documentation as well. So there was like, approved the chart, that was a good choice.
Yeah, cool. Well, but I really appreciate you coming on and talking about MDEx. I think we can like slowly start to wrap this up, but we have a pretty good question, and I think both of us can answer it. It has nothing to do with what we were talking about, but I feel like we've both been on this developer journey. And so Desmond asks, how has the journey been transitioning from a junior to mid, then senior dev? Did you have mentors along the way? And then how about like coding in multiple languages?
Oh yeah, that's a really, I mean, we could record a podcast just.
I know, we really could. We could. I'll give it a stab. I think one, it's really important to have mentors, right? You need to work with people that are smarter than you but also support you like learning and kind of like trust in your ability to learn and produce, right? And
Yeah.
I would say if I were to think back when I first started, I was a very junior developer. I was mostly like an iOS developer, dipping my toes into like Node.js and some backend API stuff. And the second I kind of felt like I could build a full app, right? I can do the front end app work and the back end REST API. I was really cocky and thought like I knew everything. And I think like I talk about it a lot on this podcast, but the Dunning-Krueger curve. I think juniors have a really good habit of once they feel like they can build a whole app, you're at the top of Mount Stupid, but you feel like you could like conquer the world, right? And then you start learning about like security vulnerabilities. Your app might have gotten hacked, and you fall down real quick, and you're like humbled. And then from that point on, I would say you start becoming mid, and you slowly are building your way up to a senior, but you always know how much more you don't know the more you learn, right? So I feel like you're always on this chase to know it all, and it's impossible. You never will.
Yeah, it's interesting because when you are junior, you don't know much, so you can not do much yet, and then you start learning, and then you start producing a lot of code, a lot of stuff, and then when you are in the middle, it's like you are on the top of the curve, like over engineering everything, like writing a lot of stuff, and then senior for me is when you realize that you don't like code is not the end goal. Like coding is just part of the process, and then removing code is actually better than adding code. Yes. Which is kind of the opposite when you're learning, but there is this difference when you get into like more a senior position. And
it becomes the simplest solution as the best solution, not the over engineered. Like I feel like there's a weird thing and among engineers, not just software engineers, but you want to like flex how smart you are with a real complex solution. And that's the last thing you want in your code base is a complex solution. You want the simplest version of that solution.
Yeah. And two more things. One about mentorship is it's really, really good to have mentorship, but don't wait for mentorship. You have to build something. Like you don't need permission to build something. You can just build something and publish. Like just that's true for open source, for mentorship. Don't wait. Just go and build something.
Yeah, like I was really fortunate. Like I worked like, I like my first developer job, I just was like, the CEO liked me. he liked my drive and motivation. So I kind of like luckily fell into that and had like a really
Mhm.
good mentor there. But at the same time, like if you don't have that, say you don't have a dev job, but you have an idea, build that and then, watch podcasts like this, watch my tutorials, follow other people building stuff in the Elixir community, and those people become your mentors and you can learn from them because they'll post about either what they're building, maybe a mistake that they made, and like so you have it, you're just acquiring it a little differently.
Yeah, and don't be afraid to do stuff. Like 2019, I had a talk at Elixir Conf, and the talk started with a mistake I made, like really, really hooking mistake. I was trying to contribute uh, just a fix on the documentation on Erlang, and I completely messed up the Git, the Git branches or whatever. It was like a really rookie mistake, and like it happens. And that was part of my talk because I was trying to say, hey, just go and do stuff, and
Yeah.
just don't need to wait. And sometimes something bad happens, but it's fine.
Yeah. I
Yeah,
mean, it doesn't matter where you are on your career. Like you can be a staff level engineer and you're still going to run into things you've never seen before.
yeah,
Like I feel
yeah,
like what
that's true.
makes what levels up an engineer is the ability to solve a problem that they've never seen before, you know?
Yeah, yeah. I feel like that now working with the WASM stuff. Like I I have been reading about WASM for a long time. I've never used it, so now I feel like a junior working with
Yeah.
WASM because that's new to me, right?
Hmm.
And that's fine.
Yep. I mean, so like to go on his like what about coding in multiple languages? I feel like the basic principles of programming, they're all the same. You're just changing syntax essentially, right? I mean, object-oriented programming versus
Yeah,
functional and immutable obviously have their differences, but for the most part, like writing a programming language comes down to syntax. And I context switch a lot less now. I write a lot of Elixir and a little bit of JavaScript. I don't do a lot of other things anymore. But when I was jumping between like Swift, JavaScript, C sharp, and that was at the beginning, and like I learned a lot. I'm real thankful, but it wears on you. But at the same time, you just end up like I would like forget how to do like for loops in languages, right? Because so I had like Google syntax all the time. But like for the most
yeah.
part, like the concept of programming is relatively the same between all languages. You just have to remember the syntax or like the
Yeah,
language, you know?
understand the fundamentals and you'll be
Yeah.
fine. You
Yeah,
can jump
exactly.
into another language and you'll be fine. I guess for me, the hardest like move was from Ruby and Rails to Elixir. My first year or so working with Elixir, I was still trying to write like objects, like an instance and state, and
Yeah.
using Gen servers as a class. That kind of
Yeah.
it was a mess
Coming from an
initially.
object-oriented programming language, like that's all I knew. And then I came to Elixir. It was hard. It's hard to change your mindset.
Yeah, but also once it clicks, it's way easier. I think I
I
believe like
agree.
I have a feeling that Elixir is way easier than other languages, but you have to first, the functional programming has to click on your mind
Yes.
first, and then
I
it just
think
goes.
if you started with it, that's how your brain works, solving problems naturally, right?
Yeah,
Like you kind of transform a thing and pass it along. But once you have object oriented clouding your brain, it's hard to go
but
back to that and relearn that way of
but
thinking.
but if you start with functional programming, you have to learn object-oriented programming as well because you become
Yes.
a better engineer when you understand both. They are
I
not.
agree completely.
They're not. It's not alternative to one to the other.
No,
You can learn from both and use both. I
I
mean,
agree.
depending on the language, but the concept, the ideas, you
Yeah.
need to both.
Yeah. Well, like just the idea. Well, when you're in the object oriented world, you have a lot more architectural patterns, right? And You learn about like singletons, and you can pass state around and objects, and it has its superpowers, but it also leads to a lot of really hard traceable bugs.
Yeah, that's one thing with functional programming. At least for me, it leads to a simple code
I
way
agree.
more than object programming. Yeah,
It sets you up to
like
write clean code.
yeah, and think of not in the sense of like the clean organization style. Like I mean, clean coding, like writing less
Like the
code.
simplest, yeah,
Like
less code,
yeah, yeah,
simplest approach to a solution, right?
yeah, and another yeah. That reminds me of another stuff. Like when I was every time I try to contribute something, I try to learn from the maintainer. And you can learn from people like Joseph Valim, Chris McCord, and others.
Mm-hmm.
They have like a really good approach about thinking, design, and realizing what is needed and what is not needed, which is probably more important. And then you can learn. And I see that those guys they try to make the most simple solution and the most effective one,
Yeah.
which is really really hard,
I think
but
it's
you can learn.
I think it's harder to know what solutions shouldn't even be brought into a conversation too. Like, how many features get thrown at any kind of like open source project or language or anything, honestly, even if you're building a SaaS product, right? You know how many feature requests you're going to get, and the ability to know what strengthens your product versus what doesn't. I think that's probably the hardest piece.
Yeah, the balance of the amount of code you need to write to support new features, because the code has to be flexible enough to
Hmm.
grow and support new features, but not over complex. So
Yeah.
this balance is really, really hard to get. You have to write just the minimum amount of code that is flexible, secure enough to continue. But that's really hard to do. I don't know if there's formal education on that, but at least for me, that was like years of experience,
Yeah.
making mistakes, really writing bad
Time
code.
in the saddle, making mistakes and learning from them. Like, I I think my most like leveling up events in my life were really bad mistakes.
Yeah,
But
you can learn from them for sure.
yeah. Or hearing about other people's mistakes. Like, I just had Thomas from Level All on, and staff level engineer, like super smart guy, and they just had like a rate limiting issue with OAuth, and like
Hmm.
so all their users couldn't use their platform all of a sudden. And it's like one of those things where you don't think about, and like they have like a school system platform, right? A learning platform. And all the students from a school district were on the same IP address. And so they hit a problem that they never knew they had, because they were hitting a rate limit on authentication. And it's
But
just like things like that.
that's another way to learn is exposure to real world situations.
Hmm.
Like, and if you're a junior, you're not gonna have so much exposure, but you can like other people do, and you can learn from them, and then you grow, you keep going, and as you get more exposure, that's where you learn.
Yeah.
So
More
that's another way. Yeah.
conversations, and like meetups are really important. Go meet people, talk about your projects, talk about your problems. And 9 times out of 10, someone else in that room that's listening already had the
Hmm.
same problem you're experiencing, and they can tell you how they solved it.
Yeah, we have a really good Elixir meetup nearby in Toronto, and we have meetups, I don't know, twice a year, maybe not. It's not so frequent, but every time it's packed with a lot of people and really good talks. It's another way that you can also share, like you can give a talk in a meetup if you feel like. It's another way to, I feel it's like another way to learn as well.
Mm-hmm.
Is sharing about what sharing about
Yep.
your experience. So yeah,
I
there are
agree.
many ways to grow in the career, but yeah, it's a very long topic.
Yeah, you just gotta keep doing it, keep showing up every day, right? And then
Yeah.
eventually, before you know it, you're like, wow, I've learned a lot and I still don't know a lot. And you just kind of have to accept that. And then that's it.
It's impossible to know everything.
Yeah,
If
no.
someone says he knows everything, he's lying, because it's impossible.
I'm going to tell you where he is right now. He's on the top of the Dunning-Krueger curve. If someone claims to know it all.
Yeah. We are always learning.
For sure. Absolutely. All right, Leandro, thank you so much for joining me. This was a fun conversation, as always. And yeah, anytime you want to come back on, just please reach out.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Thanks to everyone for tuning in and listening. I appreciate it and hope you guys have a good weekend. Testing.